Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hassan, back with a brand new episode here in The Truth. Back once again with my boy AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today? Dominating.
Yeah,
Hey,
just
we're 2 0
dominating.
2. We're
Yeah,
2 0
no.
2.
Hey, we're undefeated over here. Our squads are doing good right now. Hopefully we can keep that going.
I will say the Saints look like the best team in the league right now. I'll be 100% honest. I was saying after week one, like, hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Okay, we're going against Carolina, and obviously dominated them there. And then you guys went into Dallas and took care of business once again. And I'll talk more about that in one of my takeaways this week. But yeah, I mean the Saints are 2-0, Vikings are 2-0, the Ravens are 0-2. So you know that it's definitely the NFL season if things are going like that. But yeah, as you said, obviously with the Saints, I feel the same way about the Vikings. Super happy right now. Both teams obviously 2-0. I know it's very early in the season. I remember when Atlanta was 2-0 a couple years ago. They ended up like 5-11 or something terrible like that. So I'm very aware of that. But at least I'm enjoying the wins. I know you are as well. But anyways, guys, we are doing our week 2 NFL, or actually fantasy football takeaways. We are recording this on a Monday. Actually, Monday Night Football is going on right now. I think this is going to hopefully be kind of our new schedule. We might record on Tuesdays, but it's just usually easier to record on Mondays. So this is what we're going to be doing for now. Obviously, Atlanta and Philadelphia is playing. If there's something major that we want to talk about in a takeaway, we'll do it for the next show. But a lot of games on Sunday, a lot of games on Thursday, and just a lot of things to talk about. So we're going to give you guys each our 5 takeaways from week 2 in the NFL as far as fantasy, I guess even NFL relevancy as well. But without further ado, AJ, go ahead and give me your first takeaway from fantasy last week. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Anthony Richardson looked like he was one of the better quarterbacks in week 1, made one of the best throws I've personally ever seen. And then, yeah, week 2 kind of stalemated and didn't have the successes from the past week, which I know is part of it, and I understand that. But definitely was a little bit weird to say the least. My first takeaway is Kamara looks like vintage Alvin Kamara. I mean, he absolutely dominated last week, absolutely feasted on the Cowboys, scoring 44 fantasy points. The first week had 22 fantasy points. His stat line 20 carries, 115 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 receptions, 65 yards, and a touchdown as well. Kamara absolutely dominated, as mentioned, and I'm hoping this is the same Alvin Kamara that we saw a couple years ago. I know as a Saints fan, you know the Kamara I'm talking about. But he absolutely dominated. He was feasting against the Cowboys. He looks great in that running game, which is a bit surprising to me. Not the fact that Kamara wasn't able to be a good running back. I just was kind of a little bit skeptical to see what that Saints offensive line was going to do going into the year and how Kamara was going to be impacted. I also wasn't the biggest Kamara fan, at least to start last season. I'm sorry, this season, with maybe Kendre Miller getting some reps. Obviously, he didn't look great, and then he got injured. And I was also worried a little bit about Jamal Williams, but Kamara's, done that's what he needed to do. He's the number one running back, obviously. He's averaging 33 points a week. But all in all, I think Kamara maybe he's back to being vintage Kamara. What about your second takeaway? Hmm. So my second takeaway is Baker is low key a sleeper option, and more than that, at least in fantasy right now, ESPN when I clicked on it when I was like researching before the show, he's a number one fantasy quarterback right now, which is hard to believe. But averaging 24.2 points per game. Obviously, last week I think he had like 18 or 19 points, and then week one he had the 29 or 30 points. So absolutely, has been feasting. I guarantee you, most people did not draft Baker Mayfield. And most people, I wouldn't say don't have Baker Mayfield on the roster, but he's rostered in 60% of leagues. Is Baker Mayfield low-key a sleeper option? He obviously signed that big contract in the offseason, but he's really been feasting. He's done everything that you ask for out of a budget quarterback. And it just goes again to prove my point that quarterbacks don't really mean anything, especially in fantasy with the PPR formats and things like that. But Baker's been feasting. Personally, I wish he threw the ball to Mike Evans a little bit more because I have Mike Evans on my team. But you know what? It's nice to see Baker feasting, and maybe Baker's finally established his home. He's had a turbulent career, to say the least, just being from the Browns, going to different teams like that. But maybe Baker is officially back, and although he's not going to sustain the number one quarterback position, maybe he can finish inside the top seven and be a real deep sleeper for those that drafted him very late in their drafts. Okay, what is your third takeaway? Yeah, so my third takeaway is the overall, just in general, the tight end disappointment. And I'm talking about the big name tight ends. Like Kelsey's averaging like 4 points in his two games. Laporta is averaging like five. Andrews had obviously a terrible week one, had like 9 points last week. McBride, I mean, all these big time tight ends that we talked about in the preseason are disappointing a lot of fantasy owners, including myself. But we talked about, throughout the preseason, the fact that the tight end position was potentially going to be the best tight end position in recent memory as far as fantasy is concerned. And although a lot of the lower level tight ends or guys that we didn't give too much recognition about are having the successes that we were expecting them to have, they're seeming to have more success than the big name tight ends. In my opinion, I think that's a good thing because the big name tight ends, the guys like Kelsey, the guys like Laporta are going to figure it out and they're going to be able to get more repetitions on the field. You also have to factor in two guys like Laporta and Kelsey. Obviously, Kelsey's been doing it for an extended period of time. Laporta last year as a rookie. Defenses are gonna, press those guys more. They're gonna actually cover those guys more and not let them get out to the open field and things like that, which is gonna make it harder for them to get those receptions and those points. But I think overall that tight end disappointment is, a little bit disappointing. But I know that, it's a time to buy low on these guys. I did it in one of my leagues. I picked up Laporta. Well, I didn't pick him up. I traded for Laporta, I should say. But maybe it's time to buy low on these big name tight ends and maybe sell some of these guys that are having success now that may not as time goes on. So yeah, I just thought overall tight end disappointment at least through week two. Okay, your fourth takeaway. My fourth takeaway is the rookie wide receivers starting off really well. Obviously, you mentioned Neighbors. He's had a great start to the year. Proving guys like myself wrong. I really thought that just because the Giants' offense was super bad, that Malik Neighbors wasn't going to be able to have success, but he's definitely sustained success. Brian Thomas Jr., who obviously you were big on, had a big start to the season. Last week, I believe it wasn't his volume that led the way. It was like 99 yards or something like that in a touchdown. But all in all, he's had a good start to his career. Lab McConkey scored a touchdown in his first week. So rookie receivers are stepping up to the plate, and I think that's expected, especially in today's day and age. Guys like Worthy, but I don't think it was really anticipated, especially guys like Neighbors and even BTJ, the level at which they're extending and having success. So good to see these rookie receivers get into the mix right away. Obviously, as you move on and move forward, like wide receivers are going to have success. I talk a lot about second year wide receivers being the best year of their career. It seems to be a lot of the case. Think of a guy like Jameson Williams, kind of came out of the shadows. I know he's not a rookie anymore, but a guy that had a little bit slow start to his career and has kind of picked up steam. So with wide receivers, I feel like in particular, unless you're a big time guy like a Neighbors or a BTJ, it's going to come whether it's this year or next year. But at least early on, these rookie receivers have started off really well and have had a good amount of fantasy relevancy to get their careers underway. All right, and then your final takeaway from week 2. They did. They did put him on IR. Yeah. Yeah. And there's no guarantee he's going to come away back right away after those 4 weeks as well. My final takeaway is just injuries, injuries, injuries. We talked about the Tua injury before we did our week 2 start, sit, sleepers, and busts for the Sunday games. But it seems like a lot of these injuries, and it happens every year, right? Injuries are going to happen. I tell you guys all the time, you can't draft for injuries, right? Like you can't predict injuries or what they're going to happen because obviously things are going to change. But at the end of the day, too, like especially in a situation like this, the injuries just seem to continue to mount at an eclipse rate. Obviously, you mentioned Puka Nakua. Cooper Kupp both going to IR. Christian McCaffrey on IR. Deebo Samuel just got injured. He's going to be out a couple weeks with a calf strain. And we only know what happens with calf strains, just like at McCaffrey, although his is kind of calf, more Achilles type pain. Guys like Isaiah Pacheco came out today that he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, injuries stacked upon injuries. And I mentioned Tua, like it's part of the NFL, but it's kind of how you're supposed to build your fantasy teams to build them up, to provide depth, to get depth on your roster. Obviously, you don't want your big name guys to go down, but it happens, right? So it's important to build up depth right there. But for me, at least, it's just been interesting to see the amount of injuries that have happened. And it's not like it's necessarily all concussions or things like that. It's just game injuries. It's a tough sport to play. Obviously, a lot of people get after Twitter or whatever, like, oh, like you ruined my fantasy team or you ruined my bets, whatever. But they're putting a lot out there for their bodies. So it's one of those things it's fun to watch. It's why football is super fun to engage in and watch, and it's just crazy. And I hope that the injuries obviously stop, but unfortunately, that's just not the reality of the NFL. And it seems to be that injuries are only going to continue to move up from here. Thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at The Truth as one to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. I'm looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp through focus and memory. Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports AZ and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, while also maintaining an ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.